My name is Kayla, and soon I'll be turning 55. Life has changed so much over the years, and not always for the better. I raised my son Nick, mostly on my own. When he was in middle school, I divorced his father after discovering his infidelity. It was a hard time, but in many ways, it brought Nick and me closer together. We only had each other, and that bond helped us through the tough times. We built a life together, one where we leaned on each other. But now, everything is different. Nick is married now, and I live with him and his wife Norah. At first, I thought she was lovely. Norah is beautiful, charming, and seemed to have a warm presence about her. I remember thinking that Nick had made a good choice, that he had found someone who would make him happy. But as time passed, that image of Norah began to crumble. Living under the same roof has a way of revealing people's true selves, and Norah's real personality was far from what I had imagined. Norah doesn't work, she stays home, claiming to be a homemaker. Yet nothing about her reflects that role. She leaves all the housework to me. I try not to complain. After all, I've worked hard all my life, and I'm used to taking care of things. But it wears on me. Every day after my full-time job, I come home exhausted, only to be met with a mess, dishes left undone, laundry piling up. When I ask Norah for help, she turns on me. Her words sharp and biting, as if I've crossed some invisible line. Nick sees it. He knows what's going on, and he's tried to talk to her. He's asked her to help me, to at least share the workload. But Norah's temper is quick, and she doesn't hold back, not even with him. After being on the receiving end of her anger a few times, Nick gave up. He stopped asking, stopped pushing her, and I think, in a way, he resigned himself to living in this strained atmosphere. And so I did the same. I decided it wasn't worth fighting over. I would keep my head down, do the work, and try to maintain peace. Then one day, everything changed. It was a quiet day, the kind where the house felt almost too still. The summer heat was fading, replaced by a cool breeze that signaled the beginning of fall. I was home, using my day off to catch up on chores, when I heard Norah call out to me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her voice had a strange edge to it, though. It wasn't her usual sarcastic tone, but rather weak, almost fragile. Curiosity tugged at me, so I walked down the hall to the bedroom she shared with Nick. What I saw made my heart race. Norah was lying on the bed, pale and barely able to keep herself from slipping off the edge. Her face was drained of color, and her hands, when I touched them, were ice cold. Fear gripped me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice wavering despite my efforts to keep it steady. She looked at me, her eyes wide with pain. "My stomach," she whispered, her hand resting over her lower abdomen. "It hurts. So bad." Her words came out in gasps, and I immediately knew this wasn't just some ordinary stomachache. She mentioned that she had been suffering from diarrhea for days, sometimes with blood. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it be something serious? Hemorrhoids? Maybe, but this seemed much worse. She was too weak, too sick for it to be something minor. I told her we needed to go to urgent care. At first she protested, saying it was nothing, that she just needed water. But I couldn't ignore the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. I practically dragged her to the car, feeling a surge of frustration at her stubbornness. She was clearly in pain. Why was she fighting this? On the way to the clinic, I called Nick. He was at work, but I told him where we were headed, and he promised to meet us after his shift. I could tell he was worried, though he tried to mask it. As we arrived at the urgent care, the waiting room was packed, and I felt the weight of the hours stretching before us. Norah collapsed onto a bench, barely able to keep her eyes open, and I watched her, fear tightening around my heart. We waited for hours, time crawling by as I kept glancing over at Norah, wondering how much worse things could get. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, her name was called. I helped her up, her body limp and heavy against mine, and we shuffled into the examination room. The tests started, one after another, and by the time they were done, we were both exhausted. I could see the toll it had taken on Norah, and I sat beside her trying to find comfort in the silence, but none came. Then the doctor walked in, his expression serious, and my stomach twisted with dread. "We need to run more tests," he said. "I'm admitting her to the hospital." I nodded, feeling a numbness settle over me. I had known this was coming, hadn't I? But hearing the words out loud made it real, and suddenly, the weight of it all crashed down on me. Norah was being admitted to the hospital. Zrania, and whatever was wrong with her, was serious. As the nurse showed us to Norah's room, I called Nick again to let him know what was happening. He said he'd come by after work, but I could hear the stress in his voice. He was barely holding it together, just like me. After settling Norah in, I went home to grab some of her things. Clothes, a toothbrush, the basics. When I got back, Nick was there, looking worn out and defeated. "She told me not to come," he said, shaking his head. "She said there's nothing I can do." I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of dealing with Norah's unpredictable moods bearing down on him. He was trying, but I knew he was close to breaking. We brought Norah's things to the hospital, and as we walked into her room, she was asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in what felt like forever. I couldn't help but think how lovely she looked like that when she wasn't yelling or sneering. But the peace didn't last. The next day, Norah was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. The doctor explained that it was a chronic condition, something she would have to manage for the rest of her life. Worse, there was a tumor, and the possibility of cancer loomed over us like a dark cloud. The doctor recommended surgery, immediate surgery, but Norah refused. She claimed the cost was too high, that she couldn't possibly afford it. I offered to pay for it, desperate to do something to help, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Norah's mother, Victoria, appeared. She was a woman I had only met a few times before, and each encounter left me uneasy. She had a coldness to her, an arrogance that I couldn't quite put my finger on. When I handed Norah the check for the surgery, Victoria snatched it from her, glaring at me with contempt. "There's no need for this," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Norah will be fine with just medication." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The doctor had made it clear surgery was the best option. But Victoria refused to listen, and Norah, ever under her mother's influence, backed down. I felt helpless, watching the two of them reject what could save Norah's life. Nick tried to intervene, but Victoria shot him down as well. In that moment, I realized just how deep Victoria's control over Norah went. Weeks passed, and Norah's condition worsened. She was in and out of the hospital, her health deteriorating by the day. Nick and I continued to visit, though each time it became harder. Norah was growing more hostile, more bitter. She lashed out at Nick constantly, blaming him for her illness, for the situation they were in. It was like she was determined to push him away, no matter how much he tried to help. Victoria was no better. She accused Nick of being a failure, of not doing enough for Norah. She told him he was useless, that he didn't deserve to be a doctor. I watched as Nick's patience, already worn thin, started to crumble. He was reaching his breaking point, and I didn't know how much longer he could hold on. Then, one evening, after yet another hospital visit filled with insults and accusations, Nick made a decision. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm filing for divorce." I didn't argue. I knew how much he had struggled, how hard he had tried to save his marriage, but Norah had pushed him too far, and there was no coming back from that. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and tense conversations, but in the end, Norah agreed to the divorce. It seemed that even she had grown tired of the fight. Not long after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Victoria. Her voice was frantic, panicked in a way I had never heard before. "Norah's condition has worsened," she said, her words rushed. "It's cancer. Terminal." My heart sank. The tumor they had ignored for so long had spread, and now it was too late. Victoria begged Nick to come see Norah, to help in any way he could. But he couldn't. He had given everything to that marriage, and there was nothing left. He was drained, emotionally and physically. Norah had chosen her path, and now she had to live or die with the consequences. Nick was quiet for a long time after that. He wondered if he could have done more if he had failed Norah somehow. But as time passed, he found peace in knowing that he had tried. He had done everything he could, but Norah and her mother had made their choices. And now there was no going back. Months later, Nick and I left the city. We moved to a quiet, rural area where life was slower, simpler. Nick started working at a new hospital, and I found a small community clinic where I could continue my work as a doctor. The days were peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, we both felt like we could breathe again. From time to time, I think about Norah, about what could have been. But I've learned that some things are beyond our control. Norah had made her choices, and now all I can do is hope that in whatever time she has left, Zrenia она находит мир. Nick and I have moved on, building a new life, one free from the toxic atmosphere that had once suffocated us. We still carry the scars from those years, but now they are a reminder of what we endured and what we survived. And for that, I am grateful.